So this is the Sawblade. I have no idea what kind of steel the body is made out of. There are a lot of conflicting opinions on the internet on whether you can or should use Sawblade steel for a knife. I have a new knife grinder, a torch, and an old Sawblade. I figured that would be enough for me to find out. Right off the cutoff wheel, I can tell that the blade steel is not mild steel by the spark pattern. Actually, let me show you. Here I'm grinding mild steel, boring old sparks. Here is some 1075 carbon steel. Note how the sparks are splitting at the ends in a more brilliant show. And here is a bit of the Sawblade steel. Definitely not mild steel. I'm not a bladesmith. The intricacies of molecular breakdown of different steels is overwhelming to me at best. For me, I just needed to know if there was enough carbon in the steel to harden, and if so, I could then temper the steel to a knifeable state. I heated the sample to critical, then quenched it in water. I tested it with a file. You can see here how a file will scratch mild steel, and here it just skates across the blade sample. Still not convinced, I hit it with a hammer. It shattered, so that lets me know it's hardened and brittle, indicating the presence of carbon. Mild steel definitely wouldn't do that. There is a fantastic video on the science of heat treating and martensite, austenite, critical temperature, and solution. I'll link it below. Confident in the hardenability of my steel, I set forth to make a marking knife. I laid out my design to have a flat back with two main bevels so the knife could be used either left or right-handed. With a 36 grit belt on my grinder, I started with the stock removal. I just grinded the shape to my lines, then started working on the main bevels. A quick shout out to my friends at Grizzly Industrial for supplying the G1015 grinder/buffer. I'll link the grinder in the description, and as always guys, you can save 10% by using the code WALKER10 at checkout. Thanks Grizz. Now, I wanted to see if I could grind the bevels freehand. Nothing wrong with using a jig, but I really just wanted to see how I would fare. I think I did pretty good. Time for hardening. I heated the blade to non-magnetic, then heated it a little bit more before quenching in water. In this hardened state, the blade is too brittle, so I needed to temper the blade before putting an edge on it. I put it in my oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit for about an hour, then let it cool to room temperature. Once it was tempered, I took the blade back to my grinder. I wanted to keep the scale from the heat treatment and only polish the bevels. Before putting the actual cutting edge on the blade, I flattened the back on my diamond stone, then ground in a secondary bevel. Then I took it to sharpening on my water stones and finished on the strop. It's sharp enough to shave the hair on my forearm out of focus, probably sharper than any marking knife really needs to be. Next, it was time to focus on the handle of the knife. I had a chunk of some figured walnut from that last big table build I did, so I chucked it up on the lathe. Spindle turnings like this are just fun because unlike unbalanced bowl blanks, you can crank the speed way up from the very beginning. I roughed it into cylinder with a roughing gouge, then started shaping it. I finished with a bowl gouge and parting tool. I'm thinking about making a limited run of marking knives to sell on my website, www.wmwalkerco.com. That's short for the William Walker Company. If you're interested, let me know in the comments so I can gauge how many to make. My idea was to have a brass ferrule and to have the blade act as a wedge to secure the ferrule in place. This is backwards, but a completely mechanical joint. So I drilled a hole in the end to accept the blade, then I trimmed the end and parted the handle. I always like to finish strong, so here's a shot of the back of my hand instead of a kerf that I'm cutting at the bandsaw. While I'm on a roll, let me show you the finished knife after the blade ferrule wedge design split the walnut, completely negating the purpose of the ferrule in the first place. With that lapse of judgment, the knife still works, and I'm calling it done. So, can you make a knife out of a saw blade? In this case, I'd say yes. Should you make a knife out of a saw blade? I don't see why not, but the benefit of using known steel is you can also find the heat treating schedules for those specific steels. So there's less guesswork when it comes to knife making and heat treating. And with that, I'm off to learn everything I can about knife making. Thanks for watching.